The Amazon rainforest might look like a paradise, but it's also one of the most dangerous places on Earth. Hidden beneath the beauty are creatures, curses, and mysteries that have claimed lives in the most chilling ways. Some people went in chasing adventure or discovery and never came back. Here are 5 of the most terrifying deaths that still haunt the heart of the jungle.
No threat, no invasion of territory. What could have driven one of the America's most respected predators to turn on an unarmed man? Was the jaguar protecting something? Was it sick? Or is it possible that beneath the wild beauty of the panel?
It was a humid June evening in 2008, and the jungle was alive in that eerie, breath-holding way it often is after sundown. Along the banks of the Paraguay River, near the isolated Cayman Nature Reserve in Mato Grosso State, a young fisherman, just 21 years old, had set up camp in a remote spot known as Pacu Gordo. It was a familiar area to locals, but far from safe. There was no real infrastructure, no electricity, no cell signal, just dense, untouched vegetation, flickering lantern light, and the ever-present sounds of something moving in the dark. That night, the fisherman, traveling with his father and other companions, zipped himself into his tent to get some rest. The site, about 25 meters wide and 10 meters deep, was carved into the forest, but the jungle surrounded it like a wall. With only open flames and makeshift lamps for light, the shadows were long and thick. Everyone knew the risks: snakes, insects, even caimans, but no one really expected what was coming. Around 7:30 p.m., as the forest settled into its nocturnal rhythm, the unthinkable happened. A jaguar, stealthy, powerful, and absolutely silent, emerged from the brush. Jaguars are apex predators, and this one was large, possibly older, likely pushed toward human territory by habitat loss and shrinking food sources. It didn't hesitate. It didn't snarl or roar. It simply crept through the darkness, found the tent, and entered. Inside, the young man never stood a chance. The jaguar went straight for the back of his neck, its jaws locking with surgical precision onto his cervical spine. The tent offered no protection. The attack was fast, brutal, and shockingly calculated. The animal bit down with immense force, crushing bone and severing the spinal cord. There were gashes on the victim's shoulders, chest, and arms, wounds from claws that raked through skin and muscle in seconds. The young man was killed almost instantly. Then, in a haunting show of dominance and instinct, the jaguar dragged the body 60 meters into the forest. It was an act not of defense, but of predation, cold, purposeful, and terrifying. Back at the riverbank, his father was the first to notice something was wrong. When radio contact went silent, he and the other fishermen rushed to the tent. What they found was horror: torn canvas, blood, and deep claw marks in the dirt. They followed the trail into the jungle, calling out, hoping, but knowing deep down they were too late. When they finally recovered the body, the damage told a gruesome story. The autopsy revealed comminuted fractures in the neck, multiple bone fragments, a traumatic dislocation of the spine, and massive neurological damage. Cerebrospinal fluid had leaked from the skull, and there was a significant loss of tissue around the cervical area. One section of the left skull was crushed and torn away. The jaguar had aimed to kill with absolute precision. The attack wasn't just violent, it was calculated. Experts later classified it as a predatory strike, not provoked, not defensive. The jaguar had stalked the site, identified the most vulnerable target, and struck with surgical lethality. Cases like this are rare, but they're becoming more common. As human expansion continues into Brazil's central wilderness, fueled by agriculture, fishing, and development, the boundary between man and beast is blurring. Jaguars, once kings of undisturbed jungle, now find their territories carved up and their food sources dwindling. And when the jungle feels cornered, it responds. This wasn't just a tragic accident, it was a brutal reminder. The Amazon may look beautiful, but it's still wild, and sometimes it hunts back.
A lot of people think that every single species of cayman is nothing more than a smaller alligator that acts as jaguar fodder. Well, I'm about to tell you today that you are very wrong. Now let's cue the intro.
It was a quiet Sunday afternoon in Guajira-Mirim, a small town tucked deep in the Brazilian Amazon, the kind of place where children grow up alongside the river, where the forest is as much a playground as it is a mystery. That February day in 2010, 7 kids, barefoot, laughing, carefree, were bathing in a shallow, flooded stretch of water known as the First Igarape. These narrow channels, fed by the Mamoré and Novo Pacas rivers, are lifelines for locals, twisting through dense forest and serving as both roadways and sanctuaries. But the Amazon has its own rhythm and its own rules. At noon, the water looked peaceful. Birds chirped overhead, and the children splashed without a worry in the world. But beneath the surface, something massive was waiting. Without warning, it struck. One of the children, a bright-eyed 11-year-old girl, vanished beneath the surface with a scream that was swallowed by the jungle. Witnesses could barely process what had happened. A nearby fisherman said he saw the massive black reptile, jaws clamped tight around the girl before it slipped back under, vanishing without a ripple. Panic erupted. Locals, police, and firefighters searched frantically through the flooded channels, calling her name, diving into waters they knew might hold something monstrous. Hours passed. Nothing. Then, just after 8 p.m., someone saw it. Near the second Igarape of the Triangulo, about 100 meters from where the attack had taken place, bubbles began to rise. The water trembled. The shape of something enormous moved just below the surface. A firearm was raised. One shot rang out. Then the beast emerged. The black cayman broke the surface, still holding the girl's body in its jaws. It took 7 more shots, echoing across the dark jungle, to bring the animal down. It was monstrous, over 13 feet long, weighing nearly 800 pounds. Its jaws, now still, were stained with tragedy. The environmental police hauled the carcass into town, the silence heavier than the weight of the reptile itself. The girl's body was sent to the local morgue. The autopsy revealed haunting details: small puncture wounds across her chest, legs, and buttocks, about 2 to 3 centimeters each, clean and deep. Her right femur was fractured, tooth marks still imprinted on her thighs, but it wasn't the bite that killed her. Her lungs were full of water. She drowned. This wasn't a freak accident, it was a reminder. The black cayman, one of the largest predators in the Amazon, is a shadow in these waters. While crocodile attacks are more commonly reported around the world, attacks from South America's alligator relatives, the caymans, are rare, but no less deadly. This girl was one of many children who play in the Amazon's waters, raised beside it, trusting it. But in the blink of an eye, the river turned predator. And once again, the jungle reminded everyone that it never forgets who it belongs to. It was supposed to be a quiet day on the river, a lazy afternoon like so many others in the humid heart of the Amazon basin. In a remote Bolivian town called Rosario del Llata, where the river winds through the jungle like a serpent, 18-year-old Oscar Barbosa made a decision that would cost him everything. No one knows exactly what he was thinking. Maybe the alcohol dulled his senses. Maybe the river, so familiar to him as a fisherman, felt more like home than land ever did. But as the sun beat down and the water shimmered, he leapt from his canoe into the murky current and vanished beneath the surface. Then the screaming started. Locals say it was over in seconds. What pulled him under wasn't a crocodile or a jaguar, but something far more insidious, tiny, relentless, and swarming. Piranhas. The water churned red almost instantly. What followed was chaos, panic, shouts, fishermen rushing toward the current. By the time they reached him, it was already too late. The flesh had been torn from his throat and face. His body was ravaged, and he had bled to death in the very river he had fished for years. Police suspected suicide. Oscar knew those waters well, too well. If anyone knew where the piranhas hunted, it was him, and yet he jumped. His death wasn't the only one. Just a year later, hundreds of miles away in Brazil, a 5-year-old girl met the same gruesome fate. She was playing near the edge of the river when the shoal struck. A frenzy erupted beneath her feet, dozens of razor-toothed mouths snapping, ripping through water and skin alike. Screams echoed through the forest as adults rushed in, too late to save her. The river, once again, claimed a life. Piranhas don't hunt like wolves. They're not monsters from a Hollywood thriller. But when the conditions are right, low water levels, high heat, and blood in the water, they become something else entirely. Silent, sudden, unstoppable. While most attacks result in minor injuries, nipped toes, bitten fingers, there are times when the river turns violent. In some places, entire schools of piranhas have surged toward shorelines, biting dozens of swimmers within minutes. In São Paulo, over a dozen people limped away from the Tietê River with gashes on their feet. In Piauí, 100 people were treated after an outbreak of attacks. And on Christmas Day in Argentina, more than 70 bathers were torn into by a ravenous shoal. These aren't isolated freak occurrences. They are reminders, warnings etched into flesh. Despite their size, rarely growing longer than a foot, piranhas are perfectly engineered for chaos. Their teeth interlock like jagged scissors, designed to strip meat with surgical speed. They rarely kill humans, but the Amazon doesn't follow rules. Sometimes all it takes is one wrong step, one leap into the wrong stretch of river, and you're gone. What makes their attacks so chilling isn't just the blood, it's the speed, the silence. One moment, you're there, laughing, floating, alive. The next, you're gone. And the river keeps flowing, as if nothing ever happened. It was a sweltering day on the edge of the Brazilian countryside, where cornfields roll out like golden waves under the punishing sun, and the buzz of insects fills the heavy air. Life in this part of the country moves slowly, predictably. But on that day in 2005, something broke that rhythm, something primal. A 55-year-old farmer, a man well acquainted with the land, set out from his hut near the river Tietê, along the border between Mato Grosso do Sul and São Paulo states. He had heard the rumors: corn stalks trampled, ears of maize half-eaten, massive hoofprints etched deep into the damp soil. And now, standing before him in his field was the cause: a hulking solitary figure, a lowland tapir, female, nearly 180 kilograms of dense muscle and instinct. She was feeding quietly, her head bowed, unaware or unconcerned that she was not alone. To the farmer, this was no gentle forest dweller. This was a pest, a threat to his livelihood. He didn't hesitate. Grabbing a knife, he approached. Maybe it was pride, maybe it was anger, maybe he thought it would be easy, but wild things don't play by our rules, and they don't go down without a fight. As the blade sliced into her side, the tapir erupted, not in flight, but in fury. She turned with feral strength and lunged. Her teeth, built to grind roots and fruits, found new purpose in flesh. She clamped down on his thighs, tearing muscle from bone. Her next bite struck his neck, then his arm. There was no chance to run, no time to scream. The cornfield became a battlefield, stalks thrashing as man and beast struggled. He was dragged through the soil, blood splashing across furrows and fallen leaves. The injuries were catastrophic: deep puncture wounds in the neck, vicious tearing around the thighs, one bite near the testicles. He hemorrhaged rapidly, collapsing into the dust, alone, dying. By the time his companion found him, he was lying on his back, his eyes open to the sky, body still faintly warm. The field told the story: disturbed earth, scattered corn, and blood. So much blood. The tapir didn't survive either. She was later discovered near the plantation, bleeding heavily from the stab wounds inflicted earlier. Both predator and prey, both victim and aggressor. 2 lives lost in a matter of minutes. Tapirs aren't known for violence. They're quiet, often elusive creatures, usually avoiding human contact. But this case, the first fatal tapir attack ever recorded, shattered that perception. When provoked, even the gentlest animals can unleash a force few could imagine. Their powerful jaws, capable of crushing thick vegetation, become instruments of survival when threatened. And this one, cornered and wounded, had no choice. What makes this story even more haunting is the silence that surrounds these creatures. Little has been written about the risks they pose. No warnings, no safety protocols, just assumptions that because they are shy, they are safe. But nature doesn't play fair, and sometimes it's not the predators with fangs and growls that strike hardest. Sometimes it's the ones we underestimate, the ones we wound without a second thought. This was not just a tragic accident, it was a reminder that in the wild, respect is not optional, that even the most peaceful beings have limits, and that when those limits are crossed, the consequences can be devastating.
I'm scouring the mighty Amazon River to uncover the killer that tore into passengers trying to escape from the river's biggest boat disaster.
On a humid Saturday night, deep in the Amazon's winding veins, the Sobral Santos II glided steadily into the dark harbor of Óbidos. It was September 19, 1981, a routine journey between Santarém and Manaus. Aboard were nearly 500 passengers, families, workers, traders, most just trying to get from one side of the jungle to the other. The river was calm. The air was thick. No one could have known what was about to happen. In an instant, the calm shattered. The ferry capsized, overloaded with cargo. Crashing into an unlit dock, chaos erupted as hundreds were thrown into the black waters. Screams rose into the night, swallowed by the jungle. The boat sank fast. There were no lifeboats, no time. People fought to stay afloat, clinging to each other, kicking against the pull of the river. And then, something worse. Survivors later spoke of the strange currents, of being dragged downward by invisible hands. Not the river, they said, something else. Of the 500 souls on board, barely 180 made it out alive. The rest were lost, their bodies scattered or never found at all. When wreckage was recovered, searchers were horrified. What they pulled from the water weren't just drowned bodies, they were ravaged ones. Limbs were torn, flesh was missing in chunks, and eerily, almost all the hands remained untouched. A diver who volunteered to search the wreck re-emerged quickly, shaken. "There's definitely something down there," he said, refusing to ever go back in. For decades, the truth remained murky. Local authorities blamed piranhas. It made sense. They had the reputation. Sharp teeth, swarm behavior. But something didn't add up. Piranhas don't drag full-grown people under the water, and they don't typically strike living prey with such sudden force. In 2014, British angler and biologist Jeremy Wade arrived in Óbidos to dig deeper. What he found in the waters of the Amazon chilled even him. He cast doubt on the piranha theory. Instead, he focused on something far more massive. Drawn by blood and commotion from nearby fish processing plants, enormous predators may have swarmed to the site of the wreck. Red-tail catfish and piraiba, both known for their size and strength. These fish aren't your average river dwellers. They're monsters in their own right. Piraiba grow as long as grown men. Red-tail catfish have been known to swallow prey whole, and in the chaos of the sinking, their instincts may have taken over. Wade theorized that it wasn't just teeth that killed those people, it was force. Victims were yanked under before they could scream, drowned in seconds, torn apart in the murk. To this day, Óbidos locals remember that night with a shiver, a ferry vanishing in plain sight, friends and loved ones never surfacing. No final goodbyes, just a haunting silence broken only by the sound of the river. The Amazon is mysterious, beautiful, lethal. What lurks beneath its surface is more than fish. It's a reminder of how little control we truly have when nature decides to turn. The Sobral Santos II was supposed to be a passage home. Instead, it became a floating coffin, swallowed by darkness, and what really happened under those waters may never be fully known. Only the river knows, and it isn't telling.